the quiet village of Nwanyoma, where the sun kisses the earth with a glow, there lived a woman named Adanna. She was the wife of Obinna, a man whose laughter was as hearty as the harvest and whose strength was the backbone of their family. Their home, a modest structure of mud bricks and palm thatch, stood as a testament to their love and toil. As the first light of dawn crept through the cracks of their bedroom, Adanna stirred from her sleep. The room was adorned with hand-woven aquete cloth, the patterns telling stories of their ancestors. Obinna lay beside her, his breath shallow, his once robust frame now a shadow of its former self. Adanna reached out, her hands trembling, to touch his forehead. It was as if he was being claimed by a fever that no herbs could cure. She whispered his name, a plea for him to stay, to fight the unforeseen foe that was stealing him away from her. The village healer had been in and out of their home, chanting incantations and offering potions, but the spirits seemed deaf to their plea. Adanna knew that the battle was not in the physical realm. It was a journey that Obinna had to take alone. As the cock crowed, signaling the birth of a new day, Obinna's breath ceased, and a profound silence fell upon the room. Adanna's heart shattered into a million pieces. Each shared a memory of their life together. The news of Obinna's passing spread through the village like a harmattan fire. Relatives and neighbors gathered, their faces etched with sorrow, their whispers a tapestry of grief and disbelief. Adanna, now draped in the traditional mourning clothes of Abada, sat motionless, her eyes fixed on the doorway where Obinna would no longer enter. The women of the village encircled her, their presence a fortress against the storm of despair. The room, once filled with the echoes of laughter and love, was now a sanctuary of silence, save for the occasional sob and the comforting words of the elders. The walls, which had witnessed their life's joys and sorrows, stood as silent guidance of the love that had once flourished within them. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the earthen floor, Adanna knew that her life had irrevocably changed. But in the depths of her sorrow, a flame of resolve flickered. She would not let her spirit be buried alongside Obinna. She would rise for him, for herself, and for the legacy they had built together. The sun rose over Nwanyoma, casting a warm light on the compound where Adanna's home stood. The village was awake, the air filled with the sounds of mourning, children playing, chickens clucking, and the distant thuds of pestles against mortar. But within Adanna's walls, the world stood at standstill, suspended in a state of mourning. Adanna sat on a low stool, her figure shrouded in her Bada cloth, its deep black hue absorbing the sorrows that enveloped her. Her eyes, once bright with dreams, were now pools of grief. The women of the village, her sisters in spirit, had stayed by her side throughout the night, their sense of lamentation rising and falling like the breeze. As custom dictated, the men gathered outside, their discussions punctuated by solemn nods and occasional claps of hands. They spoke of Obinna, of his strength, his kindness, and the void his passing had left in the fabric of the community. The air was heavy with the scent of incense, burning in small clay pots around the room. It mingled with the aroma of fresh palm wine and the bitter leaves prepared for the morning ritual. The elders said that the scent will guide Obinna's spirit on its journey to the ancestors. Adanna's mother-in-law, Nneka, sat across from her, her face a mask of stoic acceptance. Tradition bore heavily upon her shoulders, the weight of generations dictating her every move. She had been through this before, had worn the black cloth, had felt the sting of loss. Yet her eyes held a glint of something unspoken, a knowledge that the days ahead will bring challenges none of them were prepared for. The ritual began with a pouring of libations, the liquid seeping into the earth as prayers were whispered to the heavens. Adanna's hands trembled as she accepted the calabash, her lips moving in silent supplication for Obinna's peaceful passage. As the day wore on, the house filled with visitors, each bringing their condolences and offerings. Their air was thick with words of comfort, but they fell on deaf ears. Adanna was adrift in a sea of memories, each one a reminder of the love she had lost. The setting sun cast long shadows across the compound, and the mourners began to disperse, their footsteps a soft echo on the path. The night will bring solitude, and with it the first whispers of the storm that was brewing on the horizon. Adanna knew that the coming days would test her, that the traditions of her people would clash with the desires of her heart. But in the depth of her mourning, she found a speck of defiance. She would not be broken by custom or by the greed of those who sought to claim what was not theirs. The morning sun had barely risen above the horizon when the compound of the late Obinna began to stir with activities. Today was the day his will would be read, a day that tradition held high in regard. It was a time when the living spoke for the dead, and the dead, through their last testaments, shaped the future of the living. Adanna watched from the doorway of her home as relatives, close and distant, filed into her compound. The men were wearing flowing agbada robes, their colors vibrant against the backdrop of the village. The women were adorned in jet wrappers, their heads wrapped in matching scarves, their movements graceful and deliberate. The air was filled with hushed conversations and the occasional clinks of kola nuts being exchanged, a sign of respect and unity among the Igbo people. Adanna's heart raced with anticipation and dread. She knew that Obinna had loved her, had promised to protect her even in death, but she also knew that the power of tradition and the greed that it could awaken in men's hearts. The family gathered under the Iroko tree, its massive branches providing shade and a sensational ancestral presence. The lawyer, a man from the city with a reputation for fairness, arrived with a will in hand, sealed with Obinna's family crest. As the will was read, Adanna felt the world around her grow silent. Obinna had left everything to her, the house, the land, the livestock. It was an unprecedented act, a deviation from the norm where property often passed to the male lineage. A murmur rippled through the crowd, a wave of disbelief and discontent. Adanna's brother-in-law, Uzodimma, stood up, his face contorted with anger. "This is not our way," he bellowed. "A woman cannot inherit a man's wealth. It is against our traditions." The lawyer held up his hand, calling for calm. Obinna was clear in his wishes, he said firmly. He believed in his wife's strength and her right to continue the legacy they built together. The tension was palpable, the air thick with unspoken threats and the stirring of conflicts. Adanna stood, her back straight, her eyes meeting those of every man and woman who dared challenge her. She was no longer just a widow. She was a woman with rights bestowed upon her by her husband's love and trust. Adanna returned to her home, the will clutched in her hands like a shield. She knew that the battle of her inheritance was just beginning, but she was ready to fight, to honor Obinna's memory, and to forge a new path for the women of Nwanyoma. The days following the reading of Obinna's will were fraught with tension. Whispers spread like wildfire through Nwanyoma, carrying with them a mix of admiration and disapproval of Adanna's unprecedented inheritance. The women of the village looked upon her with new eyes, seeing not just a widow, but a light of change, a challenge to the status quo. Adanna, however, found little time for reflection. Her in-laws, led by Uzodimma, had wasted no time in contesting Obinna's will. They claimed it was a forgery, a trick, an affront to their customs. They demanded that the property be redistributed according to traditional laws, which favored the male relatives. The compound became a battlefield, with Uzodimma and his supporters arriving each day to claim pieces of Adanna's life. They took the goats, the chickens, even the yam band that stood as a symbol of Obinna's hard work. With each item they carried away, Adanna felt as though they were erasing the life she and Obinna had built together. But Adanna was not alone in her fight. The women of Nwanyoma, who had long suffered in silence under similar circumstances, rallied around her. They came each day, a colorful procession of solidarity, their voices raised in song and protest. They wore their George wrappers and coral beads, not just as adornment, but as armor against injustice they faced. The elders of the village were divided. Some sympathized with Adanna, moved by her plight and Obinna's clear wishes. Others sided with Uzodimma, bound by tradition and the fear of change. The village square became an arena of debate, a place where the future of Nwanyoma's customs was contested. Adanna stood firm, her resolve unshaken even as she watched her home being stripped bare. She knew that the fight was about more than just property. It was about dignity, about the rights of women, about the legacy she will leave for her daughters and the daughters of Nwanyoma. Adanna, sitting in her now sparse living room, the walls bare, the floor swept clean of the life that once filled it. In her hands, she held the deeds to the land, a piece of paper